A veil of steam curls from a vendor's brazier. Charcoal roasted fish glisten under paper lanterns as a child darts past, chasing the tail of a fox mask worn just moments ago. The sun hangs low over tiled rooftops, casting golden light across a warm warren of alleys. Market stalls, shrines, and tea houses. 1,000 lives, 100 stories, and one map that ties them all together. A painted scroll hanging in the magistrate's hall, showing not only the houses, but in small, careful strokes, its inhabitants, its life. It does not show the world as it is, but it does understand the world. Hello adventurers, and welcome back to the Red Quills. In this episode we are continuing and finalizing our historical maps series and talking about a map that we create in the style of the Edo period in Japan. We're going to be talking about how you can create an urban map that is isometric, that is personable, that feels real, and that uses the styles and understanding of the world that you can find in Edo period artwork. If you ever wanted to make a map for a capital city or a bustling river port or a sacred metropolis full of shrines and festivals and intrigues, then this one is for you. We're going to explore how the Japanese mapped their cities, not just how they were laid out physically, but how they were imagined, experienced, and sanctified. And we'll talk about how to structure a city map based on the Edo period traditions, incorporate storytelling, symbolism into the labels. We can talk about how to choose visual cues from Japanese woodprint blocks and hanging scrolls and travel guides. And finally, we can create something like this, a compelling, readable fantasy map for your own fantasy city. In order to build a map in the style of Edo period Japan, we first need to understand how they understood the world. Because unlike the maps that were created in Europe around the same time, the ones which really stressed geographical accuracy and mathematical precision, the maps of the Edo period were artistic and representative and had a distinctly perspective view of the world. The Edo period, which lasted from about 1603 to 1868, was a time of a lot of internal structuring, of political rise, and incredible artistic productivity. Under the Tokugawa shogunate, Japan was largely closed to the outside world, which meant that they needed to create their own systems of understanding the world. It meant that they had a distinctive cultural, artistic understanding. Because of the populations of Edo, which is modern-day Tokyo, Osaka, and Kyoto, ballooned, they needed a way to navigate, both physically and visually, in a way that expressed their own culture. Let's take a look at some key historical examples. They're going to be the basis for our artistic and conceptual foundation. Ishikawa Ryusen was an artist who created some of the most visually arresting maps of his time. And his maps were not what we'd call accurate by modern European standards. It blends geography to suit composition and aesthetic priorities, but it feels true in a different way. It's a practical map, but also an emotional one. It wants to be used by the inhabitants, not by an architect, not by an engineer, but by someone who understands the city, who wants to find their own house. Utagawa Hiroshige is the most famous for his landscape prints. He's from towards the end of the Edo period, around 1855. He produced an illustrated guide of many different places within Japan that blur the line between map and art. And one standout piece is the illustrated famous places in Edo, which combines cartography and storytelling and tourism into this sort of visual document. It doesn't just show streets, it celebrates places like markets and shrines, gardens and bridges, and each is rendered individually with its own personality. And it's accompanied by a short caption or a poem. It's a travel guide for tourists and for inhabitants of the city who want a different perspective. And there are many, many more. A lot of the artwork and the cartography of the Edo period wasn't strict mathematical cartography. In fact, most of it was sort of travel guides, understanding of the world from a perspective viewpoint, a sort of isometric doll's house approach to the world that prioritized the way it felt on the ground over the mathematical precision that we know and are comfortable with in Western societies today. And it's that style that I want to bring to this map. So let's see how we can make that work. All right, adventurers, it's time to turn ink and paper into imagination. And in this section, we're going to be building a fantasy map inspired by the urban cartography of Edo-period Japan. And I'll be guiding you through the whole process to combine this sort of practical layout with a symbolic element, which creates a picture view of your city. So you can really feel as if you're in your world. You can know what the inhabitants are seeing from the ground. And I'm going to tell you how you can easily replicate this style for yourself, because it's not something that requires a huge amount of artistic ability. All you need is patience and a few different thicknesses of pen. So let's start with creating the layout. A nice blank sheet of A2 watercolor paper, and we'll get out our pencil. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create just an understanding of the city. I'm going to make a symbolic center. In this particular case, it's going to be the lake at the center of the town. The lake has, a river leading in, and I'll make a dam at the bottom. And then around that, I want to create the feeling of the terrain. Because this is going to be a perspective map, I really want to show that. So I'm going to be creating some hillsides on the left, some islands in the center of the lake, and a massive sort of towering pillar of rock on which I'll create a palace on the far side of the lake. That's going to be the sort of symbolic center of the map. That's going to be what pulls the eye. The lake is the lifeblood of the city, but the towering pillar of rock and the palace on it are what everyone looks to. On the other side, I'm going to divide the flat plane into sections so I can see where the roads are and I can maintain the idea of where the perspective is. If it helps you to maintain perspective, and I would recommend this, make sure that you do have a sort of circular grid going out so you can understand as you go through and sketch things what the ground line is, what the flat plane looks like. On the other side, I'll create a guest house and a spa, but I'll get to those later on. Because what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take out some watercolors and I'm going to really highlight that. I'm going to use some inspirations from Edo artwork. I'm going to create this large blue section. It's really going to feel like that is the focus of the town. It's quite easy to draw it, but I'm going to go over twice underneath the rocks, the pillars in the center of the lake, so that you can see some sort of ripples there. And after that, what we can go through is do the labels. In the same sort of style, I want to mimic that feeling of labeling it. I'm going to have two labels. One is a rectangular yellow district label, and one is going to be a circular blue location label. The idea is that if you think of it as suburbs versus sites. So I'm going to divide the town into these various different districts. Some of them tell us what's in them. They could be marketplaces, they could be, living districts, or they could be the holds for particular families. And then the sites we can go through later on, and they are specific buildings. And that gives me a clue, if I do them first, of where I can put the big buildings. Now, in order to save on time, I'm not going to go through and sketch out all of the different buildings individually. That would take far too long for me. You can, and I would recommend that you do at least in block shapes so that you can make sure that you know where the horizon lines are so the perspective stays the same, because I have to admit I got a little bit messy as we went through. Don't yell at me in the comments. I mean, feel free to yell at me in the comments, but I'm already aware that I've made an error there. So as we go through, what we're going to do next is we're going to draw the buildings. And it's really, really simple. Don't be intimidated by it. What you're going to want to do is use different thicknesses of pen. We're going to start with a 0.4 millimeter pen to do the outlines of the buildings. That's going to be, the major shape of the building and its internal structure. So you're going to want to outline, what the roof is, where the different walls are, and otherwise leave that the same. What I'm going to do first, I'm going to test the idea in a small area, and then we're going to go through and do it in stages. So we're going to go through and do the 0.4 millimeter outline. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take a 0.1 millimeter to do the paneling on each of the houses. We're going to have different structures. So you can have the basis of it, the foundation, then you can have the steps. You want 2 panels for the sort of livable area of about 1 person tall, so it's about 2 meters, and then you're going to have a separate panel at the top. So you've got 4 distinct structures on each of the houses. Each of these panels, should be a little bit less than 1 meter by 1 meter, but that's the sort of scale you want to be using it as. And I've got a few different types of panels. So when we go through after we paneled everything, and you want to take this opportunity to do the roof as well. So long strokes at the top, spaced apart, and shorter strokes overlaying each other at the bottom gives the appearance of that sort of, thatched house. And we're taking that directly from Edo artwork here as well. Then you can come through with the thinnest pen, and you can do the paneling itself. Now you'll notice as well that not all of the labels that I have been colored. So some of them, especially the roads and the squares, are just in a very, very thin black pen. And I wanted to test out how that worked. I would recommend making a smaller label for those. Even just banners of red, I think, would have been a really good way of doing that. But it was too late by the time I did it, and that's fine. You're going to go through with a thinner pen, and you're going to do the paneling on the interiors. So we're going to use slats, horizontal slats to represent windows, and we're going to use cross-hatched grids to represent the structural parts. And we're going to checkerboard, so you can't have slats above the grid. That's going to make it more visually interesting. I'm also going to have doors represented in that particular way as well. And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to sit back and realize just how long you've taken to do this part of the map. And you're going to think to yourself, oh dear, it's going to take me at least 2 days to finish this map. And you're going to go and panic, and you're going to go stress out about it because you've got a schedule to keep to. And then you're going to sit down and think to yourself, actually, you know what? On the original pictures, what they do is they put a lot of detail in the houses, but the natural stuff is just using representative lines. And what you're going to do is you're going to get your pen out. This particular one is a UniPin. And what you're going to do is you're going to use that in the same style to show the physical landscape. Going through and showing the rocks, showing the trees, showing the bamboo. You're going to use broad strokes and different thicknesses of lines. Now there is a sort of a knack to doing it, one that requires you to sort of be pressing down and releasing as you stroke in one quick flick to give that very angled, very distinctive flow to the ink lines. And as you go through as well, you can see all the different shapes that I'm making of not just the trees and the different kinds of trees, because we've got some pine trees, we've got some oak trees, we've got some bamboo, but also banners, small shrines, signs, posts, lanterns, things like that as we go through that really make the world feel much more real. So last of all, I add in some text to title the town, Akawayana in the Honshu province, and then I add in some details in the top right as well. Honestly, it's a little bit rushed at this point, but as I said, it took a really long time to do the houses, and I'm so pleased that I prioritized doing them because it looks amazing. So after I've done all of that, I've done the text, I've done the labels, I've done the pictures, we're going to take a step back and take a look at where we've been. So we finished. We have a map that should be functional, and not just for navigation, but for you as a dungeon master, as a world builder, to really get to grips with what it means to be on the ground in your world. And that's honestly, isn't it why we do this? If you really want to immerse your players in a world, you can't do better than a map like this. And it's much simpler and easier than you would think it would be. It is, however, very time consuming, so be aware of that. As we've gone through today, I've talked about a lot of the symbolic styles, I've talked about the historical references that we've used, and I've gone through the methods of creating it. So, as we finish up, what do you think? Tell me in the comments below whether you would even attempt to create a map like this. If you have an isometric map of a city of your own, then share it in the comments or in the Discord. I'm trying to create a sort of basis of other maps that I can use at the end of episodes to show different styles. And if you want to be shared, there is no better time or place to do it than right here and now. Stick a like if you found this video very helpful. Subscribe to the channel. I come out with a new video every single week. This is the end of our historical maps series. If you found it helpful, let me know in the comments. If you want to move on to something else, give me an idea of what kind of topic you want me to be talking about in the next series. I'm always open to ideas. I'll be posting polls on social media and on the Patreon, so if you have an opinion, you can share them there. But otherwise, thank you for joining me for this particular episode. As always, thank you to my supporters, to my patrons and my members. It's absolutely wonderful to have this community around me. We are getting very, very close to 10,000 subscribers. I'm making this episode a few weeks earlier, so we might have passed over it already, but we'll just have to see. But I couldn't have done it without the support of the community. It's absolutely fantastic. Thank you all. And until next week, I will see you then. Good luck with your own map making and take it easy. This is Ryan of the Red Quills, signing off. And under the Takegawa Shogunate, Tokugawa. Time of peace, social order, artistic productivity. Tokugawa, closed, internal culture, and distinctive ways.